Hi there, welcome to the Business Growth Club with me, Joe, and Mahmood, my friend and business partner. We've got a great show for you tonight because we're going to be talking about your accountant. And you might be thinking, well, that doesn't sound very interesting, but it is, because your accountant can really work for you super well and work really hard for you. We're going to be covering what's the difference between a great accountant and a mediocre / not so good one, and how you can get the very best from your accountant. I'm going to put Mahmood in the hot seat. So we'll be back. Stay tuned. We'll be back right after this. Have your questions ready. Hi there, welcome to today's Business Growth Club show. We are so pleased to have you here. The theme is growth marketing.
We're talking about actions and consequences today.
It's all about purpose.
Driving business growth with using KPIs.
We're talking money mindset.
The Growth Club, I mean, not to oversell it, but it's so well organised. So yeah, it was totally invaluable.
The Growth Club, coupled alongside with the Masters that I'm doing at Strategic Leadership at the moment, both of those things happening collectively have definitely transformed, and the Growth Club did have a massive impact for our business.
What is it that attracted you to come to the Growth Club in the first place? Let me just ask you to start off with that.
Well, because it was the two of you, basically.
Good evening, everyone. In my excitement to get into this show, I cut Joe off at the knee slightly at the end. She's given me the eye roll, and so therefore I'm in trouble later on. So yeah, a great time. I'm just going to let you know, by the way, that me and Joe have a roundup and we have a chat about what's coming on the show. There's a lot that's going to come on tonight's show, specifically deliberately, that I don't actually know what's going to be asked, because Joe's going to put me in the hot seat to share some thoughts and wisdom on this here. So as Joe was going to say before I rudely cut her off at the knees there, if you've got questions, put them into the comments box. Put hashtag replayer, which I think is the way that we're supposed to do these things here. We'll pick the comments up as we go through. So if you've got any Q&As, by all means, do share it with us. And yeah, I think it's a great show, as we always do. And I'm just going to hand over to my colleague, partner, and person who's going to give me the eye roll, Joe.
Yeah, so in the hot seat, because the theme is how your accountant can help you grow your business. And I think a lot of businesses have an accountant, but other than bookkeeping and making sure that things are compliant, are we really using our accountant in the way that we could? And also, how do you tell a good one from a not so good one? And how easy is it to move accountants and all those sorts of things? So there's certainly questions that I've had, certainly long before I met you, Mahmood. And I'm sure questions that lots of people have as well. So let's get them out there and let's tackle them, and let's pick up the comments and questions as we go on the way. So if you've got a question for Mahmood or a question for me as well, then let's see if we can help you. I'm sure we can. So the first question is, what's the difference between a great accountant and a mediocre one? How can you tell the difference?
That's a great question. Let's put you on the spot. I'm not going to personalise this conversation. I think it comes back to what it is you're expecting from your service provider. And an accountant is like any other service provider. They provide a service. And for me, if you've actually asked for a particular type of service, there's a certain level of expectation, and that accountant isn't delivering that expectation, then obviously that puts a question mark over their greatness. So I think it comes back to, A, the very beginning, what you've decided that you want for your business. And secondly, is something that's fit for purpose. So the greatness is in terms of somebody being proactive as opposed to reactive. It comes to actually understanding what's going on. So therefore, you're not the one doing the chasing as the client. The accountant is coming to you. I think the other things is language, accessibility. And I love the world of accounting. I've been an accountant for too many years to remember. I love it. But I think accountants can get very wrapped up sometimes and actually forget that the client isn't necessarily another accountant here. So when you've got a disconnect in language, jargon, inaccessibility, shutting down conversations, that can make life very difficult for that relationship to founder, to prosper.
Yeah, and it's about helping you plan ahead, really. And also a great accountant will explain to you what they can do for you, because sometimes I don't think we know what we don't know. So having an accountant actually come to you and say, look, we can do all these things for you, without trying to, upsell or, get you to buy things that you don't need. But it's really understand how your accountant can provide that service beyond the bookkeeping, PAYE. And God, thank you. And all of those, VAT and all of that sort of stuff. So what if you're not happy with your accountant? How hard is it to change from one to the other?
Well, I would normally recommend actually something before you make that change. I would probably say is not just courteous, but actually have the conversation with the person involved here. So if we're talking, I think we've got to differentiate here, Joe. So if we're talking about an organisation that's large enough to have its own in-house accounting team, its own in-house accounting function, what you've got to think to yourself is, you then might use an external accountant for whatever, is have the conversation. So if there are issues, if there are challenges, you're not quite getting the level of service that you want, talk to them, give them the opportunity to either put things right or to fix it. If the situation has got such that you don't think you've got somebody who's fit for purpose, they don't actually fit what you want, actually change is relatively straightforward these days. So assuming you've gone past that thing of communication, it's broken down, or it's time for a change, or you're upscaling and your accountant isn't big enough, doesn't have the expertise to help you with some aspects of that, the change is quite straightforward. You notify them that you want to change, you talk to your other advisor. I would do a beauty parade, by the way, so I wouldn't necessarily just choose the first person that you come across. And then the actual changeover is relatively smooth. And all accountants, to be fair, are used to the idea of clients changing, churn happening. So the mechanics are quite straightforward.
Is there a lot of work then for the client in changing accountants, or does it happen behind the scenes between accountants? So how does it work?
Well, I think there's two aspects here. The actual physical changing to a new supplier is relatively speaking straightforward. However, and this is a big however, it depends what level of control the previous advisor has had over the access to the client's systems. It depends on that transformation. There's information that's got to be transferred from one person to another. That can be quite messy. That can be quite difficult. There could be a number of factors involved there. The client doesn't need to get involved in that conversation, by the way. So if the client feels uncomfortable, doesn't want to get involved in that dialogue here, then it can be smooth or it can be quite protracted. So over 26 years, I've had experiences where it's literally been quite smooth, and that's me having been taken over and the other way around. I've had situations where it's been quite difficult to actually get information from somebody to actually get that changeover. So it's how long's a piece of string, but in general terms, it should be a smoothish process.
Is there a professional code of conduct so that when a client switches from one accountant to another accountancy firm, there is a protocol that has to be followed, like a charter or something?
Now, that's an interesting question, Joe. The short answer is yes. But however, there's nothing legal or regulatory, by the way, so anyone can call themselves an accountant. You could be a graduate who's left university, somebody who's got an A-level in accounting, or somebody who can spell it, and you can call yourself an accountant. There's no law that says you have to be a member of a regulatory body. So as a heads up, I'm not saying qualifications in themselves are the only thing you look for, but if you belong to a professional body, that's a charter mark type thing, and your professional body will regulate what they expect, how they expect accountants to behave. But it's quite possible your accountant may not actually have any experience, any qualifications, be a member of a regulatory body, and if that's the case, then you're in quite choppy waters.
So what are the main regulatory bodies that we should be looking for as business owners for our accountants to be members of? Is it ACCA? Is it CIMA? What are the ones that you would recommend?
There's about 4 or 5, and I'm wearing a different hat, by the way. So I taught professional students for about 2 or 3 decades here. So main ones are chartered, they're certified, or Chartered Institute of Chartered Accountants, CIMA, AAT. For me, those are the primary bodies. You do have another body, the ones who work in the public sector. They're called SIPFA. So for me, those are the 5 main bodies in the UK base with international impacts that I would look for.
Yeah. So it's important to get one that's properly qualified and is a member of a great. I had this is going back quite a few years, and I not with my any current situation or recent.
Yeah.
but I had an accountant that cocked up big time, and it cost me quite a lot of money. Is there any way of actually recovering losses from that have been created by an accountant? Or because I was told, he told me I just had to sort of lump it, really. Is that right?
No, that's bullshit, basically. Excuse my French. So effectively, if you go back to the initial criteria, an accountant for me has got to have experience blended with some degree of qualification. You can be part qualified, by the way, but have the experience. But that aside, all accountants who are regulated have to carry insurance, because it says if things go wrong and it's down to you that's messed up, then in the worst case scenario, then you have to indemnify the client. So if somebody messes up as an accountant and they do something wrong, it's down to them to actually put it right. For them to say, "Oh, sorry, you've got to bear the loss," is just not the way it's done.
Yeah. So that's good to know, because I think sometimes people put accountants in that sort of mystery zone of professional experts, and sort of think that we can't question and we can't challenge, and we absolutely can, can't we? It's really important that we ask the questions and that we get to the bottom of stuff, and that we don't just leave it with the professional expert, that we have a level of understanding about what's going on in our business for ourselves.
100%, Joe. Look, here's the thing. You could be a lawyer, you could be an accountant, you could be a surveyor. Well, these are professions, but ultimately they are still just suppliers. And when I say just, I'm not saying you should denigrate them. I'm not saying you should undermine them. You should respect their opinion and you respect their advice, because that's why you've gone to them. But ultimately, they serve the client. They serve the business, not the other way around. And I think a lot of people have had that over the years with lawyers, accountants, professionals, okay? And they think that they can't question them. We have the same in the medical profession and doctors. And this is not me saying denigrate the profession, but it's saying bottom line is you're the one who's in control. You're one who's in charge, and you should have the confidence to ask those questions. And if your accountant's making it difficult, by the way, to ask those questions, and I have met clients, by the way, who said their previous advisors have shouted at them, admonished them, treated them like children, that's a completely toxic way of actually conducting things. So don't be wary of actually questioning something if you don't, understand what's going on.
Yeah. So let's say you've got a great accountant, then you've picked the right one, and they're a good one. How can you actually work with your accountant to save more time and money beyond just making sure that everything's in on time?
Okay, well, I think for me from the beginning, and this is where the client and the business has got to take some degree of responsibility as well. You've got to think carefully about what is it you're wanting from that relationship. So there are many accountants who are what I call transactional based. So they're excellent in terms of processing transactions, preparing year-end accounts, which is all essential. And you need somebody who's capable of doing that there as well. You've got accountants who might perform other jobs there as well. So make sure you've got a clear sense of what is it you want from that relationship, what are your expectations. Typically, as an example, when we onboard clients, we take them on board nowadays, we're going more to let them know about what their expectations are, what the requirements are. Clients might ignore that, but they've got some idea what the timetable ahead looks for them. So having that clearly set out, and the way I look at it is that people are busy in their own jobs, busy in their own businesses. They don't actually have the time to actually remember when deadlines are, what they should be doing, and they rely on a supplier like the accountant to say, these are your deadlines, this is what you've got to do, and this is what your responsibilities are. So it's communication and accessibility for me that comes to it. Notice I haven't said anything about technical brilliance, by the way, at the moment, because even that's expected. It's the bits you do over your technical excellence.
Yeah, but you can use your accountant, can't you, for things like, tax planning, cash flow forecasting, help putting a budget together, taking some of the day job things away, like payroll, VAT, those sorts of things, and also helping you with your business planning and strategic growth. So I think a great accountant is a real asset to all of those processes.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's an interesting thing you say in there, Joe, because if you look at all those different disciplines, all those different skills here, accountants may have studied them before in their past, but they don't necessarily practice them. So I'd be very careful when going to an accountant. So I'm fortunate because in my career, I'm qualified across lots of different disciplines. I'm not just talking about me, but you may have an accountant who's very good at general tax planning, but may not understand the mechanics and the detail of overseas tax planning, restructuring, mergers. You may have an accountant who understands the concepts of business planning, but has never actually really put a proper business plan together there as well. So you need to make sure that is laid out. What I generally find, by the way, and I think business growth coaches do a wonderful job, but also there's, how can I put it politely if I can at all? Some accountants are very bad at actually making clients aware of what they do. And some business coaches and other gurus, so to speak, muscle into a territory and do things which they necessarily haven't got the competence and the skills to do as well.
Yeah, can you say a bit more about that?
Yeah, in my time, I've come across many business coaches. I'm not going to go down a name game exercise here, who are great in terms of the motivation, the good stuff, the frameworks, but then they will do things like, oh, we can do cash flow planning, we can do X, Y, Z. And I'm thinking, well, you don't actually understand the mechanics internally of what it requires, for example, to produce a competent cash flow, a cash flow that's relevant for the business. And lots of growth gurus, coaches will take on work that actually is not within their sphere of competence and expertise. And I picked up the pieces of that. And the same way that lots of people might stray outside their sphere of expertise because they just read about it on Google or they read it on the internet, and they learn as they go along, with their clients being the guinea pigs as well. So, you know, I'm not saying you should stay within your zone, but you should actually only take on something that you've got the competence to actually deliver, or you've got access to that expertise.
Yeah, and it's about using the expertise of your accountant and really thinking about what, you know, what the services that you pay for and the relationship that you've got. And also the accountant knows all sorts of things about how your business operates and flows and where there are opportunities and strengths as well. So they've got a really good insight into your business, haven't they?
Yeah, and you know, look, accountants generally speak, and they're very strange characters. I was going to share, in fact, I might actually have it with me, a Monty Python sketch here. Anyone who's old enough to remember Monty Python here, the old stereotype of the accountant. There are lots of people who are actually very much like that. So accountants are good with numbers, but they're not necessarily good at communicating with them. They're not necessarily good at actually expanding them, telling stories, but they have the connection to your business. They're the first port of call. So if you've got a good, reasonable relationship with your accountant, they're the first people you should speak to, because they've obviously got the inside track, and it's going to be good in terms of save you time, save you some energy, and they may be able to refer you on or certainly be part of that whole process. So
I think that some people, based on some of the things I've seen and experienced working with businesses, that some people in entrepreneurs sort of avoid the accountant because they don't understand or don't feel confident with talking about numbers, and it's something really they'd rather ignore. They want to get on with the bits about running the business. But how can entrepreneurs who aren't number confident really start to get an understanding for themselves so that they can feel more confident working with the accountant, doing more and growing better as a result?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point. I think there's a couple of things that spring to mind there, Joe. I would say I love entrepreneurs. I love the spirit. I love the risks they take and all the rest of it. But also, sometimes entrepreneurs can be very, what I call one-track, one-sided, and they won't necessarily, because of the very nature of what they are, embrace that idea that they've got to do planning, the idea of cash burning up there in their businesses there as well. And I think it's just trying to get that connection. I think that dissociation from those numbers is quite common in lots of people. It could be they don't know what to focus on. They don't appreciate the importance of that. They're focusing on, oh, I've got to grow the business, get the customers in, without actually thinking about the back office function. Typically, as a rule of thumb, I would say for any entrepreneur who's looking to grow a business, you need to make sure you don't underinvest in the finance function. Typically about 2 to 4% of turnover is typically as a guideline what you should be investing. And it's the same idea, by the way. I know we're not talking about marketing. Entrepreneurs underinvest in marketing. They invest in what I call the boring systems behind the scenes, which you actually need there as well. So it's having that connection that says if you want to build a sustainable business, one that you can upscale, one that you can sell on, you need to make sure you invest in the back office functions. And generally speaking, there's a big underinvestment in what I call infrastructure and knowledge to actually tap into in systems as well.
And I think, there are as many different types of entrepreneurs as there are people. They come in all shapes, sizes. Some are like super well qualified. Some left school early and haven't got a qualification to the name and have been incredibly successful in business. And I think sometimes that, we associate numbers in business with maths at school. And the two are very different, aren't they? And also numbers in business are quite logical as well, so they're quite straightforward to follow once you actually get your head around them in terms of what we all need to know to drive to drive the business forward. So get to grips with numbers, work with the accountant, use the accountant, as you've said. But when it comes to growth, then what can your accountant do for you, whoever they are? If they're a good accountant, how can they help you grow your business?
Well, I think there's a few things here. They can certainly help you identify what's going on under the bonnet. So typically most business owners, or a lot of business owners, I should say, the first time they'll actually have a look at their numbers perhaps might be the end of the year, when they actually look at their accounts that are being produced, they look at the tax return, and that might be the first insight they get into what's going on. Now, to actually run a business based on that is a complete rubbish way of doing it. You need information on a more regular basis there as well. But you also need to know what that means. So when you look at your total sales line, your total cost line, what's that broken down into the products that you're selling, the customers that you're providing services to? And that's what the accountant can do. They can actually break all that information down and say, you generate sales of X and it belongs to this customer group, that product group. So you clearly know what's contributing to making your profits or what's pulling down and making you lose money. And that's what accountants can actually do. They can do that analytical stuff and feed it back to the actual business owner and tell them what it means.
Yeah. And if you've not got a system in place which has the data to do that, then again, your accountant will know the pros and cons of different systems and can help recommend one that's right for your business, particularly if you're very paper-based and you want to go a little bit more digital or completely digital. That's a really great time-saving way that will help you with scaling as well, I think. So your accountant can help you grow, and we've been talking about how to get the most out of your accountant, but it's a relationship and it's a two-way street. So how can we be better clients for our accountants? What can we do that make us, a pleasure to work with, someone that accountants can really help, and a client that where we're a good relationship opportunity for that accountant as well, if that makes sense?
Well, it doesn't make sense. I would say there's a few things. So first of all, it's the business owner to actually be thinking about what they want from their business. So if you're standing still, if you want to stay static, which is fine, but I think it's a very detrimental thing to do, because I think all businesses have to grow to some extent, otherwise you're going to go backwards. So it's about thinking, what's the role of the accountant? The accountant isn't just about recording the numbers, doing the year-end accounts. It's about helping the business owner navigate that path. I would say probably things like you want to have a regular conversation with your accountants, whether it's once a quarter, once a month. It's also thinking about not the accountant as a cost, but an investment. Accountants, one of the battles that lots of accountants in practice have, accountants work in industry, is a lot is required of them, but actually the client doesn't actually want to pay them for doing that. And because there might be a lack of understanding, because accountants, like any service provider, there's no physical product there. The outputs are very difficult to measure, and therefore, you may not appreciate what you're accessing is skills, experiences, years of thing. So it's about respecting the person who's doing that job. Obviously, if they're doing a competent job, it's about having a better understanding that you need to invest if you want your business to progress going forward. It means you cannot rely on that thing. I think we've said it before, Joe, that what do you call it, that rubbish office in your head? Yeah,
your head is a rubbish office.
And it's about saying, actually, this involves a bit of work. And I tire and get quite not depressed about where I see lots of people who somehow say, growing a business, making profit is dead easy. All you've got to do is follow these 5 steps. You've done it. It's not. It is hard work. It is blood, sweat, and tears. I mean, it's a fantastic. I mean, I wouldn't swap it for a proper job at any time. I love what I do, but it does take work, and you're not going to be working conventional hours. And that means that also, if you're going to do all that, you need to work more smartly, and you need to have an understanding what's going on in your business, but what that means in financial terms as well. So that's, I think, it's a changing of a bit of an attitude for the owner. It's a bit of actually respect, but it's also the accountant basically stepping out and probably. I'm going to be quite blunt tonight, removing the stick out from the backside and remembering, yes, they are an important part of the machine, but they are a provider, a supplier who's there to help the client grow, move there. So it's less about themselves, but it's more about what they can do to help that client. So I think there's a two-way conversation that needs to happen there.
Yeah, definitely. So it's all about that communication, that mutual respect, and honesty as well. I mean, I don't mean that be dishonest. I just mean be open and upfront when things aren't working as well, and work that through wherever possible. Actually speak up and challenge accountants, and let's all get educated as well in terms of what we need to know for our own businesses. So that's really good advice. Is there anything else that you think that I haven't asked that you think it would be helpful for people to know or think about to close us out?
Yeah, I'm going to give some suggestions in a moment about how people can sell if they feel the time is right, that they want to move on, either because their business is going into a different direction, either because they're upscaling, or either because they think the relationship is, or maybe their accountant's coming up with retirement, whatever. I'm going to share some thoughts about how you go about selecting an accountant. Let me just flip the question back on you, Joe, before I give this bit around now. What do you actually look for?
Responsiveness, straightforward, really easy to deal with. No bullshit. Again, if I can say that word, we've said it twice in one show, so sorry. But just really, helpful, and putting themselves in my shoes and seeing what I see, and but also thinking sort of strategically and creatively about different ways of coming at things, different ways of growing and different ways of tackling stuff. So yeah, and anything that saves time and money, be proactive about it and let me know and suggest things. I really value that.
Perfect. I love that. So in terms of tips I would share about if you feel the time is right. So again, my advice always is if you are looking to change, first of all, have you exhausted all possibilities? If you've got issues coming up, have you actually had that conversation with your accountant to say, look, I'm not quite happy here, blah, blah, blah. Can you put it right? Because obviously, if you can fix it and rectify it and move forward, brilliant. If you can't, and it's time to change, first of all, think clearly what is it you want. So you want somebody to do the transactional stuff, you need records kept, you need all that things. So what is it you're actually looking for? What's your shopping list of requirements? The accountant, by the way, when you select them, you talk to them, they will be able to contribute more as well to that conversation. Look for recommendations. Ask your friends, colleagues, people who are in business, do they have anyone that they would recommend? I would typically make a short list of about 3 to 4 providers. Is location critical? I would certainly say in these modern days that we live in, the actual physical location to me isn't such a major issue. I've got clients, outside of Leicester, I've got clients overseas, but it may be an issue to you. If you want somebody who's more local, if you want somebody that you can pop to, then obviously you're going to sort of restrict your geographical search. And then check out, what the reviews they've got, what's the feedback they've got, what do you feel about, the website, everything else, and then you make a time to have that conversation. Come armed with questions, come armed with your criteria, speak to the person involved, understand who's going to be looking after your account, whether you're going to be allocated somewhere else, how they work in terms of communication, if you've got questions to ask, how do they deal with them, and then wait for a proposal. They will. Yeah. If an accountant quotes over the phone, I would avoid that like the plague, because they won't.
Yeah, you need full transparency of cost and what to expect and when you'll be likely to pay, or expected to pay, and all of those things as well. They're sort of, I suppose, it's about demonstrating the good business practice that they're trying to instill in you and support you with. It's demonstrating that themselves, isn't it? So, well, there's loads there, and if as we're in the Business Growth Club, we're here talking about business growth, and that means the financial implications of growth and the planning and all the things that come alongside that. And you need an accountant who is going to be with you every step of the way, but also the confidence, not just to make sure you've got the right accountant, but also the confidence to manage that process, to be a good client, but also to have the understanding and the competence yourself to get the most from that relationship, and go into everything with with your eyes wide open as you move forward and take your business up to the next level and scale up. So that's been really interesting. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
So we're going to be back next week actually with sort of a continuation on this, which is about funding for growth. So if you've got a great business idea, what might be some different ways that you can fund it? So again, we're doing sort of 2 weeks of a special format this week and next week, and I'll be picking Mahmood's brains again about funding for growth. So if you've got any questions in advance of that show or during the show, then get in touch and let us know. But we'll be back next week, won't we?
We certainly will be. Joe, listen, it's interesting. You're going to put me on the spot again next week. Great topics. Folks out there, if you've got any questions, follow up here, by the way, chuck them into the comments box. Me and Joe will pick them up accordingly. And I would say until next week, have a fantastic week.
See you.
See you next week, guys.
Hi there, welcome to today's Business Growth Club show. We are so pleased to have you here. The theme is growth marketing.
We're talking about actions and consequences today.
It's all about purpose.
Driving business growth with using KPIs.
We're talking money mindset.
The Growth Club, I mean, not to oversell it, but it's so well organised. So yeah, it was totally invaluable.
The Growth Club, coupled alongside with the Masters that I'm doing at Strategic Leadership at the moment, both of those things happening collectively have definitely transformed, and the Growth Club did have a massive impact for our business.
What is it that attracted you to come to the Growth Club in the first place? Let me just start off with that.
Well, because it was the two of you, basically.